Well, welcome back. Here's chapter 3 uh, for the 1408 online course. Um, and we're going to go through chapter 3. And so make sure you're paying attention and answering the questions at the end. So let's talk a little bit about lactose intolerant. Most people are lactose intolerant because they have an enzyme as they grow from baby on up. They no longer get this enzyme that allows them to produce lactase. So we're going to talk a little bit about enzymes and the importance of molecules and our everyday functions. We talked about chemistry, talked about formation of molecules, now we're going to talk about molecules themselves. And so we're going to talk a little bit about organic compounds and go to carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So there should be 5 parts to chapter 3. I'm going to kind of breeze through organic compounds. I want you to know some of it, but not all of it. I'm going to kind of pick out what you need to know. So this right here is a protein in the quaternary structure, and it looks to me like it's hemoglobin. I'll have to confirm that with the book, but it looks like hemoglobin to me, which is in the part of your blood cells that allow it to carry oxygen. So, introduction into organic compounds. So you get all sorts of molecules. You think of all the different atoms and all the different combinations and different things you can do, and so you get this huge range of molecules. But we're going to specifically talk about stuff that is carbon-based molecules. So those are called organic compounds when they're carbon-based. And when you share electrons carbon, remember we talked about methane likes to have 4 friends, and so it can go into 4 different directions. And if you remember those kind of old erector sets or whatever, they'd have these connecting pieces, and each connecting piece would have 4 different directions you could go. And so you could build all sorts of different things with that. And think of all the different ways you could link 4 lines together. And you can get this huge range of molecules. So methane, other compounds composed of only carbon and hydrogen are called hydrocarbons. So when you have the carbon, they have the hydrogens connected to them. They bond together, create different chains. So you have methane, ethane, propane, methyl, ethyl, propyl, butane, pentane, so on and so forth, to decane, whatever. So on up. Octane is 8. So those are all hydrocarbons. So there's a structural formula, then you have a ball and stick model, and then your space filling model. And so when you have carbon as a backbone, just think of how many different shapes you can make with just 5 carbons. And go ahead and play around with that when you get a chance. So here you have just basic carbon skeletons, and when they vary in length, they change. So you have ethane 2, propane 3, butane would be 4, pentane would be 5, so on and so forth. You could branch out. There's your isobutane, so it's still butane, but it's a little different shape. You can have double bonds, which butene, right? Different ways to carry that double bond. And then you can make rings, and so you have a cyclohexane and benzene ring, all sorts of different ways to shape that. And so each organic compound has unique properties. And when you get your carbon backbone, and then usually there's some sort of group attached to it somewhere, and we call that the functional group. And that affects how it functions in a biological way. And so compounds with functional groups are hydrophilic, love, hydro, water. So here's a couple of groups. You don't need to know all of these. Just understand that they are functional groups, and they will change how they react. Okay, so here's a question. Which molecule is better here? Look at them. Look at the differences. Look at the similarities. And which one do you think is better? Essentially, with very, very few differences, if you look at the way the double bonds are and that, it's really just kind of a hydroxyl group that changes them. But one is testosterone and one is estrogen. And so very, very different, very, very similar molecules, but they have very, very different outcomes. And so hopefully from there you've gathered that really one molecule is not better than another. I mean, how can you say one is better than another? So just because molecules differ does not mean that one is better than another. So different outcomes, very, very similar molecules, only slight differences. So 4 classes of molecules. When we're talking about biology, they're really important. Your carbohydrates, your proteins, your lipids, and your nucleic acids. And that's why we kind of split this chapter up into 5 different sets. We're going to go over each of those. And so they make large molecules, and so we often call them macromolecules. And they're also called polymers because they have the same kind of building blocks. And the building blocks just kind of build on one another, it's kind of like Legos, I guess you might say. And when you talk about building blocks, when you talk about one Lego, it's called a monomer, one piece. But then you put them together and they're polymers, multiple pieces. And so these monomers, in order to put them together, in order to link your Legos, you do that with what's called a dehydration reaction, which dehydrate means loss of water. So you're pulling the water out, and then they're broken apart by hydrolysis. So you're adding water, and all of those reactions are mediated by enzyme, which those enzymes speed up chemical reactions in the cell. And so our cell can make all sorts of different polymers all the time. Proteins are made from only 20 different amino acids, yet it makes up all our different proteins. DNA is built from just 4 kinds of nucleotides. And the monomers used to make these polymers are all universal, and that's very important. So here's a short polymer. You notice hydrogen on one end, hydroxyl on the other, and then you have a monomer. What do we do to get those together? We remove the water. So we take the hydrogen and oxygen from one, we pull it out, and boom, we have a longer polymer. And so what do we do to break it? We take that polymer and we add water, and it breaks it down. So that's part 1. We're going to start getting into each specific macromolecule, but that's kind of your brief introduction for organic compounds. Answer the questions and go on to part 2.